Hi, what's up, TNT? This is Wayne Johnson out of Brooklyn, New York. I always wanted to do something back home, and we're going to be doing our gospel segment on Mondays from 10 p.m. to 12 midnight. That's 10 p.m. to 12 midnight on 91.9 FM. Listen what I want you to do. Spread the word. Spread the word, TNT. Salvation, full and free. Salvation is for everybody. Mondays from 10 p.m. to 12 midnight. That's 10 p.m. to 12 midnight on 91.9 FM.
Share the live. Share the live. The Street 919 FM on Facebook and Instagram. Share the live. Iowa George on Instagram. Share the live. Iowa TV and Street TV on YouTube. Share the live. The Street 919 FM. Broadcasting from
Talk your talk, but we know talk. Come talk with us.
The Street
919 FM.
News from the Street 919fm.com. Here's what's happening.
Good afternoon. I am Vanessa Thomas with the 12 o'clock news on the Street 919 FM and online Facebook and YouTube. In the headlines, the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association holds a second blackout. The trade union sector is doubtful of government's ability to settle outstanding negotiations. The Tobago House of Assembly to raise additional funds for fiscal 2022, and internationally Brazil faces growing hunger crisis with COVID. And now the news in detail. The Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association held its second blackout in the space of 2 weeks. On Monday, secondary schools reopened for face-to-face classes for Forms 4, 5, and 6. And tutor President Antonia Tika de Freitas said it was a challenge for teachers as quite a few vaccinated students did not turn up for school.
The 30 students in some schools, you had plenty. Some schools vaccinated students who came out for yesterday would have amounted to 2, 3. I suppose in certain schools you may have had more. But then the other challenge is you're trying to do your asynchronous delivery for those who are at home still in the lower forms. You couldn't do that because the bandwidth is low, or where you're operating from there's no electricity, just as we said.
The tutor president also noted other concerns, particularly a violent incident that took place on a school compound.
Because whilst you're fighting up to get the internet up and running to finish your asynchronous class, because you're still in school and you have dealt with your 1 student or your 2 students already, you have students unsupervised on the compound because they have no timetable now. In one instance, we have a fight, a report of students beating a boy in a school. You had all of these situations yesterday. We expect that there's a lot for us to reflect on. So we expect support from our educators.
Mrs. Tika de Freitas said tutor is not against vaccination, but it is causing a problem in the system.
In Tobago, when we did our investigations, because the officer actually went to the schools, because the number of schools are fewer, secondary schools are fewer, the principals would have collected the names of the vaccinated students from Form 4, 5, and 6. Who should be out. And what they recognized as early as yesterday was that although the parents submitted the names as the child having been vaccinated, and the parents said, well, okay, you're going to organize and go to school, maybe the parent has left to go to work or whatever. The children did not go.
In other news, the trade union sector is doubtful of government's ability to settle outstanding negotiations. President of the Joint Trade Union Movement, Ansel Roger, expressed his skepticism as he responded to the Minister of Finance's statement in the October 4th budget presentation.
For the settlement of these outstanding negotiations, one statement about the CPO has been instructed to commence negotiations next year in January.
Mr. Roger outlined the extent of the proposed task and asked about the mechanisms in place to enforce the task to settle these outstanding wage negotiations.
So with some 15, 16, 17 trade unions with 2 and 3 periods of collective bargaining, no mention is made about the mechanism to be able to deal with those all of those outstanding negotiations. When is that going to complete? In this particular budgetary period, 2021, 2022, starting next year, with all of those outstanding negotiations.
Mr. Roger was a panelist on the Oilfield Workers Trade Union's virtual post-budget breakfast meeting on Tuesday when he questioned Finance Minister Imbert, saying government will settle outstanding wage negotiations to unions. In more news, the Tobago House of Assembly has indicated that it plans to raise additional funds to support Tobago as the small twin island did not receive the $4.7 billion it requested for fiscal 2022. Secretary of Finance and Economy at the Tobago House of Assembly, Joel Jack, said the THA will have the financial flexibility to approach the bond market to raise additional financing. He also discussed other ways the THA will increase revenue.
What I have done since 2013, since assuming office as Secretary of Finance, what I have done in the past was to come to the people of Tobago, to go to the legislature and to table a revised budget or revised allocation, reporting to them the projects that we will undertake, how we would appropriate the funding, and the key sectors that we'll continue to focus on.
Mr. Jack revealed the Assembly may have received over $3 billion if the bills to grant Tobago autonomy, which is currently before the Parliament, were passed unanimously. He said the Assembly has also been in discussions with oil companies such as Shell and BHP as it relates to their projections for monetizing the oil and gas reserves of Tobago's waters.
If you look at the proposed legislation that is currently before Parliament, in addition to the 6.8% allocation to Tobago, there is provision in the bill for revenue sharing and other measures. So it's a 6.8% plus in terms of allocation.
Tobago was allocated $2.357 billion for fiscal 2022. International news now. Brazil is facing a growing hunger crisis amid rising inflation and unemployment. The South America's largest nation has been badly hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, which claimed the lives of over 500,000 Brazilians. An estimated 19 million Brazilians have gone hungry since the start of the pandemic, and many have been plunged into poverty amid rising food prices and unemployment. We have this Al Jazeera report to tell us more.
Eating every day has become a challenge for people like Eriston, a former prisoner who lives on the streets of Rio de Janeiro. Surviving here the past year, he says, has been a challenge.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, the streets are very crowded and everything has become very difficult. Now no one stops here to help us. There are a lot of people dying because they couldn't get emergency aid.
The impact of COVID-19 has devastated Brazil. Almost 600,000 people have lost their lives and millions have been forced into poverty amid rising food prices and unemployment. Researchers say at least 19 million Brazilians are struggling for food. And recent images of people scavenging animal carcasses for scraps of food have shocked the country, as the difficulties people are facing each day sink in.
I've taken meat from the truck many times. We take the meat and are happy. But now there's a lot of demand because everyone has caught on to it. They're either taking it from the truck or straight from the supermarket.
At the beginning of the pandemic, Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro campaigned against lockdowns, saying hunger was worse than COVID-19. That's why last year, the government distributed emergency cash handouts to help families and businesses. But this year, government aid has been dramatically scaled back.
And that was the 12 o'clock news on the streets, 919 FM, and online Facebook and YouTube. Recapping the headlines. The Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association holds a second blackout. The trade union sector is doubtful of government's ability to settle outstanding negotiations. The Tobago House of Assembly to raise additional funds for fiscal 2022, and internationally, Brazil faces growing hunger crisis with COVID. I am Vanessa Thomas. Do enjoy your afternoon and stay safe.
News from the street. News from the street. 919fm.com.
Broadcasting from Trinidad to the world. The street 919fm.com.